questions, raise your hand, and we expect this to be interactive. And so that's it.
Okay.
Thanks. Please
No question.
So, first I am gonna who knows what this is?
Map of all the Linux distributions.
Yes. So it is the versioning of the versioning history of the Linux operating system, and as you can see, there are numerous versions of the software now, because anybody could just modify it and publish its own version. So, so you can use any version you want on your computer, and it is amazing. It's the nature of open source software. Yeah, and it works very well. It is freedom, it gives you freedom. You can use whatever version you want. You can modify it. You can publish your own version, and you can adopt any version you like. But if this is good, why don't we use it for everything? What's the problem? Why don't we use, let's say, this open source system for websites?
Because Microsoft would like to protect their properties, like the profit.
Yeah, the profit.
Yeah.
So who has the incentive to make things? So the incentive to create it. That's actually one good point. But you can still make profit out of it, even though it is open source.
Where you don't know how or can't trust the person who made it.
Yes, that's actually one big problem. And the other problem is that when you are in an organization, when you are a group of people, you have disagreements. People disagree with each other. And if I want to decide what operating system to use for the UT servers, so how can I decide about that? We can use one operating system at a time. We can use one version at a time. Yeah? We cannot let people modify it however they want. You know? That is a very fundamental problem. So we need one version at a time. So essentially, when we have a shared resource, and when we share a resource or we share objectives, generally, what happens is that we need to come to a group decision instead of individual decision. Okay? So, for example, a company cannot have multiple policies toward one issue at a time. Toward one issue, the company cannot have multiple policies at a time. The company should take one policy at a time. Okay? So, I'm going to give you more examples. So another example would be, for example, let's say we want to decide what color should be our clothes. I can use whatever color I want. You can choose whatever color you want. Yeah. But if we want to decide what color should be this room, how can we make that decision? So we are multiple, so we are a group. So there are ways to make that decision. One way is that you trust me and just I make the decision for you, but I'm not sure if it is the best way. So Now I'm going to show you what I use to think about blockchain and collective action and governance in general. So I use what to think about this? I use my brain, of course. And it is interesting that in the brain, the neurons do not have any hierarchical structure or superiority. There is no superiority among the neurons. And still, the neurons come to consensus for every action. Actually, because of our physical and physiological limitations, we cannot take multiple actions at a time. You know, we cannot move into more than one direction at a time. I can move to the right, or to the left. Yeah. So it is physical limitation, and it is interesting that neurons come to consensus and make one decision at a time. And we don't know how they do that. Is it democracy? They vote and the majority votes? I don't know. But we know that there is no hierarchical structure. There is no superiority. There is no boss. There is no boss neuron. So that's very interesting. And the more interesting part is that the system, the neural system, automatically directs the tasks and decisions toward specialized groups of neurons. So it is a kind of meritocracy, and it is done automatically. Actually, it is done through autonomous decision making. It is self-organized. Okay? So nobody is externally directing the flow of decisions and tasks. And that is very interesting concept to keep in mind. So now let's talk about some fundamentals, some theoretical foundations. So generally speaking, the decisions that we make are two types. They have high externalities or low externalities. And actually, more generally, it is a continuous range, but just for simplicity, we assume that we have high externality and low externality. And for low externality decisions, for low externality actions, the best approach is liberty, freedom, or open source. So you can do whatever you want. If your decisions do not affect others, you should be let to do whatever you want. Yeah? And if we impose collective action, collective decision, or dictatorship decision, dictator's decision on people when it is not necessary, so it is an error. We call it type 1 error, okay, alpha. And it can be through a dictator or through just people, theory of the majority. Okay? That's one situation. The other situation is that when there are large externalities and we have shared resources, we have shared objectives, and people are not independent, the decisions are not independent, there are interdependencies among the decisions. Then, if we use autonomy and we let people do whatever they want, what happens? What does happen? We have anarchy. So let's say we have a decision on what policy to take towards another country. So a country should make one policy at a time. It should take one position at a time. If the officials take different policies, different positions toward another country, so it is going to be very costly. Yeah? Or if we decide to color this room, paint this room with different colors, and I use red, I use blue, red, I use yellow, so what happens is that it is not going to look beautiful. Yeah? So no one's decision, no one's preferences will be implemented. Okay? That's when we need some kind of collective action. And the collective action can be through one person. So we need unity of decision actually. In that situation, we need unity of decision, unity of group decision, generally unity of decision. And the simplest way to achieve unity of decision is unity of decision maker. So we have just a dictator. And unity of decision maker solves the problem. But it introduces another problem. What is the other problem? With the unity of decision maker, with the dictator, abuse of power, or the moral hazard problem. So we should trust the dictator. And if the dictator is selfish, is corrupt, there are many possibilities. So here we reach to the best option. Actually, this box is the box that we focus on, the collective governance structure, democracy and its variations. So this is how the group come to one decision. The group can achieve unity of decision. So unity of group decision. And this is probably one of the most important inventions of humans. So, this is because the origin of this is because unanimity is impossible. You cannot achieve unanimity. So, if we want to paint this room, if we just rely on unanimity, it is very unlikely that everybody in this room agrees on one color. It is very unlikely. So that's why we need some other functions other than unanimity. And when unanimity is not feasible, when we have a large group, we have to adopt another aggregation function that aggregates the preferences of individuals into one group decision. That's very important. And it is important to find a good aggregation method. So the quality of the decisions depend on the quality on the aggregation function. So now we talked about group decision and things like that. So now let's focus on the concept of government versus market. So the first box was liberty. So we have freedom. It is interesting that market has a very interesting property. Market lets everybody to decide by themselves, and still it brings a group decision. And what is the group decision that market brings?
Price.
Price, exactly. The equilibrium price is the group decision that the market mechanism brings. And that is the beauty of it. So we are not forcing anybody's preference on anybody else. So actually in that box, so here, this box, as you can see, we are forcing the preferences of a group of people on another group. Okay? So the majority upon the minority, something like that. Then in the other box, we are forcing the decision of one person or other everybody else. But market, which actually can reside on the first box, has no force in it. So there is no force, essentially. So we are not forcing anybody, any decision upon anybody. And that's the beauty of it. And For that reason, libertarians and many groups say that we should just let the market decide. We should leave everything to the free market. We don't need governments. Why do we need governments? Governments only make things worse. Market can take care of everything. Yeah? So, no, you don't believe so?
Maybe so.
So, who thinks that market can take care of everything? Raise your hand. So,
Just about.
Yeah.
just about.
Most,
think so,
most
yeah.
things.
Must. Okay, so let's play a game. Let's imagine we are a group of people that we are strangers. We don't trust each other, and we are back in 40,000 years ago. There is no government. There is no institution. There is no central authority or trustful entity. Okay? So, no government and nobody we can trust. So you cannot trust anybody except me. But no, seriously, you cannot trust me either, even me. So imagine that we cannot trust each other, like the Mindhunters. So the movie Mindhunters. Who have seen the movie Mindhunters? Nobody? You should see that. It's a very interesting movie. So I'm gonna give you a brief story. So the movie is about a group of FBI agents who are sent to an island for a mission, for a simulation mission, and there are, I think, 20 agents. And they are supposed to do something, but they get killed one after another. And they realize that the killer is one of them. Okay? So, they know that one of them is the killer, and they are FBI agents. So they start collecting evidence and collecting data to detect who is the killer. Okay? So, the problem is that the killer is one of them while they are collecting data. And the killer knows how they collect data, what kind of evidence they are using, they are looking for, and what kind of techniques they apply. So the killer is one of them. And as you may guess, it didn't go well. So the killer could kill almost all of them. So I spoiled the movie. Sorry. So the killer could kill almost all of them. And at the end, they could catch him just by chance. And just out of luck. And it shows a very interesting phenomenon. When you don't have any trustable party, it is very hard to find truth, to detect truth. It is very hard. A trusted authority helps a lot. And if we don't trust each other at all, if we are a group of people who do not trust each other, we have a problem. So, let's see how the market can function in this situation. Is it going to be easy? So, there is no government, there is no institution, and we don't trust each other. Can the market function? So, first of all, what we need is some rights, property rights. We need property rights so that I have some incentive to go to the market to exchange. Okay? So we need to establish ownership because of two reasons. One is that the tragedy of the commons. You know the tragedy of the commons? Okay. So the other reason is incentive to create wealth. So for these two reasons, we need property rights. We need to establish property rights, acknowledge property rights, to incentivize people to create wealth and not destroy wealth. Okay? So that's the first component in the market. The second component is transferability of property rights. So first of all, you should be able to own something. Secondly, you should be able to transfer the ownership. These are the two essential parts of the market to function. Okay? So, how can we do that? So, we need enforcement for this. We need to enforce such contracts. Okay? So, generally we have two types of enforcement methods. We can use ex-ante costs, the costs that prevent violation of the rule, like machines, like locks, like you put a lock on the door, okay? And we can have ex-post costs, the costs that are after violation of the rule. So we put a sign on the door that if you enter this room, there is $200 fine, okay? So ex-post costs are different. There are various kinds of these ex-post costs. One is social reciprocity. So if you destroy my house, I'm going to destroy your house. Property rights. If you don't fulfill your commitment, I'm not going to fulfill my commitment to you next time, if there is next time. So, you know, if you kill me, I cannot do much. So this technique is not very effective in many situations, especially when there are a lot of people. No? Probably it works for your siblings, but when we are in a society, social reciprocity is not very effective or efficient, and we cannot rely on it. What is the other method? Reputation. So if you don't fulfill your commitment, I'm going to tell everybody that this person's commitment or contracts are not reliable, this person is not a reliable person, so the others will not be with you. Something like that. Or I actually, in New York, a while ago, the Jews didn't have, they had some belief, some kind of belief that they shouldn't sue one of them, the other Jew, to a Christian, to the Christian legal system. So they used a reputation system to be able to deal with each other and have contracts enforced among each other for diamonds. Actually, it was in diamond market. And it worked very well. But there is a catch. I'm gonna give you the catch in a minute. The last type of enforcement is what we all know about. So judges, the judicial system. And if we have a reliable judge, we can do that. But we cannot trust anybody, remember? We cannot trust anybody. So this rules out this option, yeah? But wait a minute. It is reliable judgment, not reliable judge. So judgment can be done by a group. And it is interesting that a group of people who do not trust each other can become more trustable as a whole.
Well, sounds like starting the government functions.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So, you know, for free market, even for market, we need government. We need actually parts of the government at least. We need enforcement of contracts. So, to have the market function, free market function. So, I repeat that a group of people who do not trust each other can be more trusted as a whole. Why? Can anybody say why? Tell me why. Because it's going to be hard for them to collude. And it is interesting that truth is one, but false are many. There are many false statements, yeah? But truth is one. So you can always collude toward truth, but it is very hard to collude toward one single false. Okay? So that's about it. Any question? So, I said we are in 40,000 years ago, but also we have internet. So, imagine just we have internet 40,000 years ago. We use some kind of a storm to connect to Wi-Fi, and you don't know, we might have internet somehow. So, now let's try to use a database to replace the argument. Okay? So I explained what we need for market. We want to implement all of that in a database without government. We still don't trust anybody. Okay? We don't trust each other. We just want to have a database and fix everything and have a functioning free market. Let's see if we can do that. So what should be stored in the database? We should store ownership. We should store the history of transactions. We may store reputations. There are a lot of information that we need to store for the market to function. If we can store this information, the market can function. So, for example, if we store so who owns this object, and then we have the information that I own this object, and we have the information that I transfer this object to Preston. So this is going to be a transaction. So we need two information essentially. First, I own the object, I own the thing. Secondly, I approve, I confirm, or I commit transfer of the ownership. Okay? If we have these two things, that's fine. And both of them are just information. And for the commitment of transfer, we use digital signature. Okay? So that's enough proof. But for ownership, what can we use for ownership? Who owns what? We can use the previous transactions. So if we only use the digital signature as a certificate, and I say, okay, I transfer this, I transfer, let's say, my house. I transfer my house, the ownership of my house to Preston. So I sign it, digital signature, and I give him a copy of my signature and my commitment to transfer the ownership, the property rights. What happens is that Preston has to go through, has to ask everybody if I have done this before. Yeah, because I could have transferred it just the day before to another person. You know, everything is digital. We are in the database, we are using the internet. So what happens is that Preston should ask everybody in the society, everybody that I could deal with, and ask them if I had transferred this house to them. This is impractical. So that's why we need to store ownership. And we need to keep track of who owns what at what time. Okay? And this database has particular properties. One property is that everybody can use select and everybody can access all the data, like all the previous transactions, so that we can know if the property has been transferred. Okay? This is one property of the database. The other is that nobody should be able to delete or update anything in the past, anything from the database, for the sake of security. We make the database undeleteable or unupdatable for the sake of security. Someone may say that, okay, the most secure database will be just a stone when you write the ownerships on the stone and you keep it there, read-only. If we do that, what happens is that it is going to be absolutely secure. However, we cannot transfer ownership. We cannot change ownership. Okay? So, to change ownership, we have to use insert. So we add a transaction. We add data to the database. So it is a kind of database that you can only add to it. You cannot delete it from it. So far so good. So it is getting better. Now the question is, where should we store the data? So we have computers. The question is, whose computer? Should we use my computer? I can't delete the data. I might delete some previous data. I can't just turn off the computer. I can just destroy the computer. But
That's where the blockchain comes in.
yes, just gradually.
Okay.
So where should we store the data? That's a very important question. So we cannot trust anybody. So what should we do? We let everybody store the data. So everybody can keep a copy of the data. Okay? Identical copy of the data. However, when we make change to data, everybody should make the change to data. So inserting data. So inserting data will be like publishing data. So it is published for everybody to add to the database. Okay? So now the question is, who can insert data? Anybody? So people want to insert data at the same time. So we can make it periodical, like every 10 minutes we insert one just block of data, okay? One batch of data, and we let one person add the data, add the block. So everybody may want to add a block. So we say there is $10 cost to add a block. Then less people will add a block. But we want to add a block. But we just want to add one block at a time. Okay? Remember, we want a block chain. We don't want a block tree. Because we want one version of the truth at a time. We want one version of the truth at a time. Otherwise, we will talk alternative facts. So, the problem of deciding who can add data can be solved this way. We say you bet on the next block, and who bets higher, or who bets highest, gets to add the next block. The highest bet. But there's a problem. If we do that, I reach, I can bet the highest every time, and I can add every block, and we are gonna need to trust me, and you cannot trust me. So we will have a problem. I may censor some data. Yeah? So what we do is that we say everybody makes a bet, and you have higher chance of winning the next block if you bet higher. So your chance of winning, your probability of winning to add the next block is proportional to the amount that you bet. Yeah, that is better. So that's how blockchain is born. Not quite yet, but there is something that I should mention before that, before the next part. It is not necessary to have time periods. Actually, what we need is judgment. We need judgment. And there is a problem. There is a problem if we let everybody add to the database. There is a problem. So I said we should add one block at a time. Why did I say that? Why not let everybody add things to the database at the same time? What?
If people add it at the same time, then there would be like competing versions, right?
Competing versions of what? They are adding to the same database.
Okay.
So we add everything on top of each other.
One question.
What?
But there's only one truth, so there's one truth.
There will be still one truth. So there will not be a problem with the one version of truth. But you know, let me say this. What can be inserted in the database is also important. So what we insert in the database is this, is that this person, oh, we have a whiteboard. So this person said, blah, I commit to do blah. The other person said blah. So it is the expressions and commitments made by people. Okay? So we can store everything in the database. There is no problem. So, question?
So maybe even though all the blocks are truth,
Yeah.
if the order could be changed, if someone, like all the people try to stack the blocks, if the order is changed, like the meanings are completely different. That's why people cannot add a block at the same time.
Yes, but not necessary. Let me say. So, you know, for example, I said I transfer my property rights to this land to person tomorrow. So it is gonna be added to the database. Then I say I transfer my property rights to this land to you. Okay? It is gonna be added to the database. And actually there is no problem. Because now I don't have any right to this land. And it is interesting that according to Texas law, I guess, you can do that. You can sell your interests on a property to someone, transfer your interests on a property to someone, even though you don't have an interest. You say, I transfer all my interests to this property to this person. And guess what? I have zero interests. So there is no problem. And the expressions that I commit this, I commit that, this can be there. However, the commitments, we should check if the commitments are deliverable. So who should check that? The person, the other party. So the other party should check if the commitment is deliverable. This can be time consuming and complex. So every buyer should check all the history of transactions and see if the person actually owns the object that they are selling. Okay? So what we do is that we add a restriction on the data that can be put in the database. We add a restriction, we add a constraint. And it is interesting. The constraint is that the commitment should be deliverable. The person should be able to deliver the commitment. You cannot make a commitment that you cannot deliver. In the real life, you can do that. You can write a check while you don't have money in your bank account. Yeah? But in this database, for the sake of security and simplicity and efficiency, mostly for the sake of efficiency, what we do is that we prevent that to happen. We say you can only make a commitment that is deliverable. Or don't make any commitment at all. So you can just say sky is blue, that is fine. You can add that to the blockchain. Actually, you can add that to Bitcoin. You can add whatever you want to the Bitcoin blockchain, except the commitments that you cannot deliver, except the commitments that result in a negative balance. You cannot have a negative balance. That's a restriction. That's a constraint in the database. Okay? So we put that constraint in the database just to make things easier to handle. So now that we have this, we have to make something. When people suggest blocks to add to the database, try to add blocks to the database, we should make sure that the block satisfies the constraint. All the commitments in the block are deliverable. We should make sure of that. How can we judge that? How can we judge if a block is valid? Validity in terms of satisfying the constraints, satisfying the deliverability of the constraints.
That's crypto magic, right? That's where you just make sure the hashes of all the data lines up, or is valid?
Not necessarily. That cannot help us with that.
For,
The hash cannot help us with checking the validity of the block.
or I guess just the difficulty.
No. So I suggest a block of commitments or transactions. I suggest a block of transactions to add to the database. Actually, I won. I made the bet. I won, and I added to the blockchain, the next block. So how can we make sure that this block is valid? All the commitments in it are deliverable. None of the commitments results in a negative balance. How can we make sure of that?
Go back, or make sure like
So
that.
yeah, someone should do that.
Yeah.
Someone who should do that.
Why?
We cannot trust anybody. I probably didn't do that. I'm malicious. I am trying to game the system.
Well, if everyone can see it, then everyone can do it, right?
Exactly, everyone can do it. So we are going back to that important sentence. A group of people who do not trust each other become trustable as a whole. So what happens is that we let people vote on it. So we let people check if the block is valid. So everybody can check if the block is valid. And if more than 50% of people approve the validity of a block, say that it is valid, the block is added to the chain. So we are using kind of plutocracy, actually. What?
You said that we can only make commitments that we can hold, but can't you, as a user, like suggest a broadcasting transaction where you don't have enough funds, but or are you just referring to the miners that can't add that trans? I'm wondering like how baked into the code is that rule, is that constraint that you can't add commitments that you can't fulfill?
So
Is it just up to the people of the network to enforce that, or is it literally
it's up to the
impossible?
miners. It's up to the miners. You mean practically in Bitcoin blockchain?
Yes, like including invalid transactions in a block.
Yeah. So if you include an invalid transaction in the block, the miners, the other miners, what happens is that actually that's a very good question. So the other miners see that this block that you try to add to the chain is not valid. Okay? So it is invalid because of one transaction that results in a negative balance. So the miners just ignore this. The miners ignore it because they see that it has no future, this chain has no future, and what they do is that they just make their own block and they suggest their own block. And the next block will be someone else's block. Okay? Nobody is gonna build the block on you. So voting, the 50% voting, is by adding the block on top of the block. That is the mechanism, the voting mechanism that is used. The plutocratic voting mechanism that is used is by adding the next block, using your block, using the hash of your block. Their block means that they know that your block is valid.
Okay.
They trust your block is valid.
So just the fact that you can't do that, it's actually like a second order, like an emergent property. It's not like baked. It's not like impossible. It's just
Yeah, it is implemented with this technology. This is the technique that is used to implement this voting mechanism.
Gotcha.
So, I think I pressed some wrong. So, any questions so far? So now let's define what is a blockchain. So there are many definitions of blockchain. Who can define blockchain for me? There are various contradicting definitions. So the Wikipedia says that it is a growing list of records called blocks, which are linked using cryptography. There is another definition based on consensus mechanism or decentralized ledger, and you have heard of it, I'm sure. So I think it is confusing, and they are trying to make things more confusing just to show off, and they look smarter. So, in my opinion, blockchain is simply a distributed database that is controlled by a sub-imperfect Nash equilibrium among a peer-to-peer network of heterogeneous agents. So that's simple. Was it hard? So, did you understand this? A sub-imperfect Nash equilibrium. Yeah. Have you had game theory or anything related to game theory? So, do you know equilibrium, Nash equilibrium, generally? So, sub-imperfect Nash equilibrium is a kind of equilibrium that assumes everybody can just not deliver their promise or threat. There is no incredible promise or threat. Nobody is credible. Okay? So the threats and promises that people make are not delivered, and nobody is committed to anything. So that's it. So that means we don't have any authority to enforce anything. There is no enforcement. Okay? So now let's move to this. So SPNP means sub-imperfect Nash. This is the most interesting part. Here we have different, so enforcement of rules or governance rules. So we have the collective action. We have collective action for making decisions for anything that is shared, so for shared resources, and also for the market, as we saw. So for the market, we still need collective action to keep record of the ownerships and commitments, right? So for the collective action, to enforce collective action, to enforce the rules, we can rely on humans, central authority, like corporate bylaws, so we rely on judges, or we can rely on SPNP, we can rely on equilibrium, like what happens in constitutions, US Constitution. And the same things can happen using machines. So we can have a machine enforce the rules, like ERP systems, and we can have machines come to equilibrium, come to sub-imperfect Nash equilibrium, like blockchain or DAG. And blockchain is just some constitution. So a blockchain protocol is nothing but a constitution in computer code. that instead of humans, machines come to equilibrium. That's it. So it is interesting that, so that's why I call it the constitution. So it is a constitution that is in computer code. And it is very important concept. It is interesting that every country in the world, actually every constitution in the world, has a kind of currency. Because currency gives power to the constitution, to the enforcement of the constitution for reaching equilibrium. And constitution gives value to the currency. The value of the currency comes from the constitution. So, for example, US dollars has value because of the golds that we have in the treasury. No, we don't have any gold in the treasury, in the Federal Reserve. We don't have any gold there. And even if we had gold there, it could give value to the currency, it could support the currency, if the system would force the Federal Reserve to honor that promise and give the gold in exchange of the dollar. So if the constitution is not supporting the currency, just think about it. If the constitution is not supporting the currency, it doesn't matter how much gold is in the Federal Reserve. They can just refuse to give gold in exchange of the currency. So the value of the currency comes from the constitution. And the fact that the constitution, the rules, the equilibrium prevents the government from publishing too many of the currency, issuing too many of the currency. And it is interesting that the quality of the currency is proportional to the quality of the constitution. The US currency is reliable because of the constitution. The constitution is reliable. And if you go to some other country, like, I don't know, Congo or somewhere, the currency, you see it has hyperinflation because the government is out of control. So this is very interesting that we see that in blockchain explicit form. We see that in blockchain we have currencies, and the quality of the cryptocurrency is proportional to the quality of the blockchain protocol. So the blockchain protocol is actually the constitution for issuing that currency, and it's supposed to control the currency. And the important part is that constitution can have many functions, can do many things. Issuing currency is one of them. Issuing currency is one necessary operation of the constitution. And Bitcoin's protocol only does that. But Ethereum protocol does more. It enforces contracts. So it is replacing the government's functions, essentially. And we have new blockchains, one after another, replacing different government functions. So when I see, they say ICO, I hear initial currency offering, or initial constitution offering, or actually initial country offering. So each blockchain actually introduces a new virtual country. Each blockchain is a virtual country. That is actually, from economic perspective, from socio-economic perspective, that is what is happening. And there is a competition between constitutions all the time. There has been competition between constitutions. And there is competition between blockchain protocols as well. So the one that is more efficient, more effective, more scalable, prevails. That's the beauty of blockchain. And I think in the future, blockchains can do almost all the government functions in very near future. So probably we won't need governments. So, any question?
What do you think about the security of proof of stake versus proof of work?
The security of proof of stake versus proof of work. So, the proof of work has some advantages, but the problem is that 51% attack is not that costly for proof of work. So, if you, for example, for Bitcoin, I think if you spend $500 million, you can conduct a 51% attack. So as Satoshi Nakamoto wrote in his white paper, the reason that people shouldn't do that is that the result of 51% attack is stealing Bitcoin. Yeah, I spent $500 million so that I can steal probably more than that, maybe $1 billion worth of Bitcoin from someone. And if I do that, what happens is that the value of the Bitcoin drops. So if a successful 51% attack happens, the value of Bitcoin drops, and the Bitcoins that I'm stealing are going to be worthless. So I'm stealing something that is not worth much. However, he didn't think about financial markets much, because you can easily buy an option, a put option against Bitcoin, and then do the 51% attack. So if I buy, let's say, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, and then I buy a put option against Bitcoin, a short Bitcoin, then I can conduct a 51% attack and profit from it without, and I'm going to profit from Bitcoin dropping value. And it can happen at any time, at any day.
So like, what is stopping people from doing that? I mean, I saw the other day that Apple in cash had the entire crypto market worth of just cash on hand. So they definitely have enough money to 51% attack Bitcoin.
Yeah.
What stops them from putting in like a put, like you said, and making a huge killing off it?
So one reason probably is that still it is not easy to short Bitcoin. The financial markets have not adopted it yet.
Right.
And Bitcoin is lucky that is not very
That's true.
usable yet.
That's a good point.
But still it is possible. Anybody can do that. And actually it should not be traceable.
Right.
So they should hide it somehow.
Right. Makes sense.
But back to your question, proof of stake, 51% attacking proof of stake is way, way more expensive. It is way more expensive. And proof of stake, you need to actually own 51% of the whole possible number of coins to conduct such attack. But on the other hand, when you use proof of stake, there are other problems. The problem is that when there are multiple blocks suggested. In proof of work, you only bet on one block. You put all your bet on one block. There is no reason to bet on multiple blocks because it is costly. But in proof of stake, there is no reason to put all your money on one block. You can bet on all the blocks. Whichever wins, you win. So there is no reason to choose. And the cost of validifying, detecting the validity of a block is pointless. There is no reason to do that, to find the validity of the block. Okay, so thank you.
Cool, all right, thank you.